This video will introduce you to how to graph on Excel, as well as how to label your axes and create a title for your graph. In class, you recorded the amount of time that it took you to walk in intervals of 3 meters. And we want to figure out our velocity. Our velocity is going to be our slope. And our position is going to be on the y-axis, and our time is going to be on the x-axis. This makes sense because the slope of our graph should be equal to the velocity, and the slope is equal to delta y over delta x. And so our slope should be equal to position over time, which is equal to velocity. In order to begin my graphing, I'm going to put a title up at the top. So this is for my x-axis. It's time, and then my units are seconds. For my y-axis, I'm going to write position. You could also write displacement or distance, but it's going to be in meters. Okay. We need a point that will be at the origin. After 0 seconds have passed, we haven't moved anywhere. So we're going to fill in our positions with 3 meters, 6 meters, 9 meters, and then 12 meters. You might have an additional data point if your group had 6 people. And let's say after the first 3 meters, 1.5 seconds have passed. Now I'm going to highlight both of my columns. I'm going to go up to Scatter under Charts. Now, if you have a version that isn't 2010 and perhaps is 2007, you'll go up to the top under Insert, and then you'll click on Charts. But this newer version is a little more simplified. You go down to Marked Scatter, then you just select one of your data points. Keep your finger pressed on Control and click that data point again. Go down to Add Trend Line, go up to Options, then Display Equation on Chart. That's going to give you the equation for your line, and it will ultimately give you your slope. You also can click Display R-squared value on the chart. That will give you an idea of how close all of your data is, how representative it is of the slope itself. So for example, if I had data points which were up here, up here, up here, up here, and then up here, I might still get a line that's directly in the middle between all of these points, but my R value is not going to be quite as great because there's a lot more variability. That being said, my R-squared value here is almost 1. If you have an R-squared value of 1, that means that your data points are all directly on that line. So that would be an ideal situation, but that very rarely happens. For some of the other labs that we're going to do, I'm going to ask you to graph 2 data sets on the same graph, but not for this one. The reason being that our x-axis intervals are changing between our speed walking time and our regular walking time. And so it's not necessarily so easy to go about graphing when you have different intervals for your x-axis. So for now, you're just going to create 2 different graphs, one for your position when you're speed walking and another one for your position when you're just walking at a normal pace. I can actually get rid of this box right over here. Because I only have one set of data, I can get rid of that. It's unnecessary. And now I want to talk about how to label your axes. So labeling your axis with the new version of Excel is a little bit different from the older version, so I'm just going to sort of verbally walk you through the older version because that's not what I happen to have on my computer. In order to label your axes on the older version, you need to look up at the heading and click on View. Then you scroll down, and under Toolbox you'll see something called the Formatting Palette. You click on that and a box will pop up. Under the box you'll see Chart Options. It will allow you to put in titles for your chart title, for your horizontal axis, as well as for your vertical axis. But now I'm going to walk us through how to do this using the newer Excel version. I'm going to click on Chart Layout. I'll see that it's going to allow me to change my chart title as well as my axis title. So we see that title above chart is already highlighted. So all that's required is that I click on my title and I can manipulate it however I so please. I'm going to say position versus time. That doesn't have to be the title, but it's the most straightforward. For my horizontal axis, no axis title is checked off. I do want to have a title below my axis. I'm going to type in time and then in parentheses s for seconds. I also want to add a vertical axis title. I'm actually going to change this so that it has a rotated title because that's a little more aesthetically pleasing and it's a little more standard as well. I'm going to type in position in parentheses meters. And that's really all that there is to it for this particular lab, but you're going to also do it for your speed walking. Be sure that you designate which is which, so probably in your title you're going to want to somehow indicate that it was speed walking position as opposed to walking position. So somehow these two graphs need to be different. When you submit your lab report, you're going to include the information both in the chart itself as well as in the graph. One nice way of making your chart a little more presentable is to highlight the whole thing and then add a border around it. I'm going to go to all borders, and it makes it seem much more presentable. Again, my slope, as indicated by the equation line, is equal to my velocity, but it has to be in meters per second. So when you're talking about your slope for this particular lab, as well as your x and y variables, be sure that you always include your units.